Attention. Attention.
The live broadcast you have tuned into is a pre-recorded episode of the Dudes and Beer podcast. Dudes and Beer is presently traveling the vast void of time and space in an effort to find you more of the best content in the known universe. Enjoy the following transmission, and remember, if you can't be good at it. Grab your beverages and turn up your interweb. Solving the world's problems 12 ounces at a time. It's Dudes and Beer.
Well, hello everybody, and welcome to episode 183 of the Dudes and Beer podcast. I am Chris Jordan, your host, coming to you live from fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada, with our good friend and therapist Michael Devine on the line today. We will be talking about the whole Kavanaugh situation, the election of what might be, what might not be. Right now, it's a huge kerfuffle going on in Washington with the I guess passing of a new guard for the Supreme Court, and all kinds of allegations have come out against him. All kinds of groups have come out against him. All kinds of groups have come out in support against him. So we're going to talk with our good therapist friend Michael Devine about what's going on in America, where this mentality of us versus them comes from, some of the facts behind the case, and things like that, right after we go through the Dudes and Beer news of the week. There's always all kinds of crazy stuff that happens in the news. We post all of it there on the Dudes and Beer Facebook group. Come join Dudes and Beer. It's a public group. Just look for Dudes and Beer on Facebook. My wife Amy posted a really interesting article this morning out of the New York Times. Can you spot the deceptive Facebook post? This is something that Facebook has done for a long time. Do not forget, people, Facebook was started by In-Q-Tel. They got their initial round of funding from In-Q-Tel money. They have never stopped taking money from In-Q-Tel. It came out a few years ago that Facebook and the CIA were teaming up with the whole red, blue dress, gold dress thing that was going on, that was actually like a social experiment that was done. If you recall, the first big news story that happened with Facebook was the Arab Spring. Some random Facebook guy who they were never able to actively track down started the Arab Spring and said, let's go overthrow Hosni Mubarak out in the public square. So yeah, CIA is deep in with Facebook, and whenever you start looking at things like that, and the gold dress, blue dress quiz that was going on years ago, it's really interesting how deceptive some of these articles can be, how easily deceived people are. So go check that article out. I thought it was really revealing, just the mentality behind things. Out of NPR.org is an article, No Cash Needed at This Cafe. Students pay the tab with their personal data. Also, out of the news of the week this week, this is a personal victory right here. Chris Jordan officially appeared more in LinkedIn searches this week from the CIA and the State Department than anybody else. The employers for people from the CIA and the State Department were my highest searches on LinkedIn this week. So a little applause there for me. Apparently we are making some waves here at Dudes and Beer, because yeah, that's the only reason why people that work at the Defense Department and the CIA would be actively looking at my LinkedIn profile, is because of things that I post from this show and other shows. I don't post articles like I do on Facebook. I think I maybe invited somebody from the CIA maybe a year or so ago and never heard anything back. But yeah, I appeared in about 61 searches this week, and the top searches were U.S. Department of Defense and Central Intelligence Agency. Those were the top 2 employers that searched me this week. So that's some pretty wild stuff. I'm sure they probably just heard what I was saying about them on Facebook. Out of Live Science is an awesome article. If extra dimensions do exist, they must be really, really small. Stephen posted an article out of WLWT.com. Body found on Calerian Township turns out to be discarded sex doll. He was like, is this going to be the future? Think about it. Like, what would happen with all the sex dolls from brothels? Are we just going to have junkyards full of old sex dolls now? What's going to happen with them? Out of USA Today, 100 years ago, influenza killed as many as 50 million people. Could it happen again today? Interesting think piece, and one posted by our good friend Mike Devine as we welcome him to the show right now, how the whole world was sold a monstrous lie over Lockerbie. I thought that was a very interesting article to go through and read because, yeah, it was one of those that, we were sold an entire story about the bombing of Lockerbie. And we're sold entire stories about things all the time. And I guess what we're trying to figure out as a country right now is, are we actively being sold a story? Are the allegations against Kavanaugh warranted? Are they real? Are the people making accusations credible themselves? We're in the midst of a lot as a country. Mike, where do you, I guess, come down on what's going on right now?
Oh gosh, that's a big question. Sad, frustrating.
Yeah, welcome to the show.
Hard question. Disillusion. My man, this is a good way to get started. Let's just dive right in there. I know. Gosh, go right for the heart. I love it.
Yeah.
And honestly, I for the show, I was like, okay, I'm going to watch this thing. I'm not going to say I watched every 8 hour. I tried, bouncing around a little bit. And
yeah,
the thing, that jumped out at me that I think I was just dismayed as a person was that I could see one part, something that they said. For example, I was talking to a good friend of mine, very conservative gentleman, but hey, we're known each other forever. Hey, we always talk over beers about politics, right? And sure. I asked him hey, man, what do you think about all this? So for example, he used the whole she was reading from her notes. Like it was a letter, that she didn't deviate from that whatsoever. And that's evidence that, she couldn't even remember what it was. She had to read everything, basically remember it. But then when I asked another one of my good friends, is very kind of liberal, and he was basically going, well, the thing is that she was probably so damn scared to say the wrong thing that she probably was not deviating at all from it. And
oh man, you say one wrong thing, it's out on a technicality.
Oh, you got it. And that's the thing where I was sitting there going depending on what you were primed for, if you're going in there thinking that this person was telling the truth or not, that's what you believe. The very thing that one person would use to basically give evidence for why they believed what they did, the same person is going to use the same evidence to prove the opposite. And that's just mind-numbing to me as a country, where we're at with this is basically the people that we've voted in to make the decisions for us. This is how they're presenting these cases.
Yeah, and that's quite honestly what disturbs me more than anything else. You posted, and just so y'all are aware, folks, Michael will soon be hosting the Gray Matters podcast. Gray Matters radio podcast on the HC Universal Network. I'll be popping in with him here and there, stuff like that, on the show to do stuff. And this is exactly what Gray Matters is about, is diving into issues like this, issues that are totally divisive in America, not amongst the conspiracy vein sometimes like Dudes and Beer is, but really delving in, talking to politicians, talking to other therapists, talking to psychologists. What the hell is going on, dude? Why are we so entirely polarized and at each other's throats with zero gray area in between?
I think it's to me, when I look at what's happening and why, it's almost very Machiavellian if you really look at it. It's like the ends justify the means. And I think to me, it's more apparent than ever that politics isn't anymore about governing. I think it's what it used to be about, at least for largely. You get elected, you make your election about this is where I stand, this is where my opponent stands, and obviously they're going to have differing viewpoints. And hey, that's politics. But now you see where it's only about getting elected. It's not about governing at all, because look at the tactics that they're using. It's us versus them. You're the enemy. If you don't believe what I believe, you're the enemy. And that's literally, we've dehumanized one person.
Yeah.
We have Dr. Ford, where it literally people are looking at her like she is part of some Soros conspiracy, Democrat conspiracy. Right. And then on the other end, you had Kavanaugh, where other people look at him like this guy is the most evil person in the world. He pediters women and, he's just a part of the problem. And so we dehumanized everybody and everyone gets riled up. And we can't manage it all. And as a governing body, it's not about managing and governing anymore, because now your tactic to get elected, alienate everyone more. You're going to work with them less. Nothing gets done.
Yeah.
And that's the mind-numbing thing to be, is that how are you thinking beyond getting elected or winning a nomination? Because you can't manage this way. It's absurd to me.
No. And that's just it. I think a lot of our issues as a country, and as far as our government no longer governing, as you're saying, that not being their primary focus, came with the dawn of the job of politician. Back in the times that our grandparents' age, things like that, you didn't have career politicians. You didn't have people that were politicians for 40 years, that had been in office for 50 years. Your Strom Thurmonds, your people like that, Dianne Feinstein even, where even some of her constituents are like, get out of here. You're too old. Like, you don't even have a grasp on some of the things that you sit on committees on. Like, you don't even know how it works, and yet still you're standing over the governance of it, and some of that is kind of frightening whenever you're talking about people sitting on an internet subcommittee that are supposed to be putting forth laws to protect our privacy. We as a country, and we talk about this all the time with our security expert, Arshawn McCleskey, former Secret Service fraud investigator. We as a country do not even have a legal definition of online identity. It doesn't even exist, which is why all these issues happen. EU is actively suing Facebook. They're actively suing them because they have a concept of online identity. They have this governance in place. And for some reason, with the dawn of the political age of the career politician, I think we really lost a lot of that care. I think we really lost a lot of that unction of, I got maybe 8 years to get something done. And I think if we put an 8-year cap on things, where you got 2 terms, dude. You got the same as a president. Get something done. Get something achieved.
Well, think about it. If you do something, if everything right now, let's say it is all about getting elected, right?
Yeah.
Well, then it's like, if there's no term limits. I mean, think about it. It's like, one of the biggest problems that people have is that they worry about, well, what's going to happen 2 years, 4 years, 8 years? How's it going to be used against me? What if I lose my seat? Whereas if you're only there for a short amount of time, you're only thinking about, well, I was brought here to do this, so I'm just going to do it then. What can I get done? It doesn't really matter.
I only got 8 years. I need to get going.
Exactly. And that's, I mean, think about how many of those politicians that were at that hearing, they were so bombastic about their frustrations and just the exasperation. If you were to look at their records with what's going on in their states, I mean, I'm talking real legitimate issues. How many of those things are actually being dealt with or have the ability to get dealt with the state of the political body that we have right now?
While this is going on, what is happening with our veterans? What's happening with veterans care? 2 out of 3 homeless people are veterans, folks. The PTSD, the horrible medical conditions within the veterans care system. It's horrifying what happens to the people who took an oath to sacrifice their life for our rights, for the protection of our Constitution and our way of life. And this is how we treat them. These are the issues that are before us that we seem to be, and I'm not going to say that the moral character of an elected official, especially in the realm of the Supreme Court, because it is a lifetime election. It's not a, hey, we're going to have an election in 4 years or 2 years and maybe you'll be out. That's not the way it works. Until they retire, they're there. So I can understand the unction in trying to understand this. And it's a confusing part. It's hard. A lot of my mentality is you want to stop a lot of this. Number one, let's get rid of all political ads. By pure definition, all political advertisement, TV ads, things like that are terrorism. The big T word. They are a means by which to use fear to enact your political goal. That is the textbook. Like, go look it up. That is the definition of terrorism. Using tactics of fear to enact your political end. And when you look at like John James is going to get rid of your guns. Like, you're feeding off people's fears, people. Like that's actively the definition of terrorism. So if you get rid of all that, you suddenly level the playing field between incumbent and new guy. Because the incumbent's going to have a whole lot more money than the new guy. He's got people vested already there giving him money to do stuff. He's already got lobbyists.
Well, it's crazy. Like, I always made a joke, like, if I ever, run for politics and everything, I'm going to do the 8 Mile, strategy of politics. I'm just going to come out and go, Michael Devine was caught kicking a dog. He was once caught, buying beer without a fake ID. Just like totally I would just like take away their winning their sales and almost make fun of it. That's how absurd it is. It's like cue sinister music and, cue like sinister voice.
John James pees in urinals in public. What? Who doesn't? Isn't that what you're supposed to be?
Michael Devine uses baby wipes and doesn't flush them.
What the and it's absolutely crazy, the mentality of some of this. And yet at the same time, we do have to call into question everything involving this case. It's even come out because, of course, much like any situation like this, people are going to start investigating the accusers as well. The people coming out and blowing the whistle in some people's worlds, accusing Kavanaugh in other people's worlds, wrongfully accusing Kavanaugh. I was telling somebody the other day, there was an article that came out. There were apparently 2 guys that came before the Senate and said, we're the dudes that she saw at the party. So what do you make of that? How do you take that? How do you take what's her name? Sweetak?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Squeeze. The second, third person that came forward. Yeah.
Yeah. The one who's got Stormy Daniels' lawyer, which is just troublesome to me. But yeah, like, it's come out. She had a restraining order put against her by an ex-boyfriend at one point. Has had, whenever she worked for a corporation, was let go from that corporation for allegations of sexual misconduct, for allegations of, unwanted sexual advances, for making false allegations against other people at the company out of retaliation, things like that. So it's like, how does that play into the equation?
And I think that's a problem we've run into. I mean, I think with it was a great example of the Lockerbie, story. Yeah. It's not a new thing where our government is telling us one thing, and in reality, it's something completely kind of different.
Sure.
And that's where I think where we really are at I think a crossroads as a country, and we can't trust our politicians at all, and in fact they're doing things that make people even more or even less trustworthy. I mean, think about we tend to make it very black and white. You either believe them or you don't. It's either a conspiracy or it's true. And it's like the reality is, what if it's true and it's politics as usual? Because let's be honest. I mean, if you really look at the chain of events from Dr. Ford's perspective, it's like, okay, she talked about this 10 years ago in a therapy session, right? She reached out to her congresswoman, right?
Sure.
To basically, and then it was sat on. It was sat on by Feinstein and Pelosi and all them. And then they dropped that bomb at the very last second to cause maximum carnage, right? So right away, no one on the other side of the aisle is going to believe anything because it was politics. They threw almost Ford underneath the bus and delivered this in a political kind of manner. And so all of a sudden you start questioning the validity or veracity of her claims because of somebody else taking something like a political football. And the thing is, you'd then go, would it be egregious if the other side's playing that way, that you're not going to play that way? Because the Republicans, if it was vice versa, they would have done the same darn thing.
Oh, sure.
So then you got on the other side, where I mean, let's be honest, the way that Kavanaugh came across, I mean, that anger, that vitriol, I mean, he didn't really show any remorse, any sorrow for what even Dr. Ford was kind of going through. And so then the other side's looking at this like, well, how can I even believe this guy? I mean, he basically made it partisan politics all of a sudden.
Well, and there's that, because right now Feinstein's office is under investigation for actively leaking a document involved in the case that was marked private, that was not supposed to be shared with anybody. Like you said, this thing is being used like a political football, and at the same time, if these people are victims, they're now being used as a political football.
Yep.
Totally uncool by any form of victims' rights. And we've been through this as a country before, people. If you remember the Bill Clinton investigations, they went far, they went deep. And the FBI at one point investigated the claims of Juanita Broderick, who had claimed rape against Bill Clinton when he was the up-and-coming governor of the state of Arkansas. Now, the issue was when was it? Oh, gosh, I'm trying to remember the name of the other accuser that came out that went up against him, Paula Jones.
Oh, when he was governor,
Yeah. And whenever that came out, they approached Juanita, and she denied things. She didn't want to get involved with it. She didn't want to be, whatever happened. I don't want to be involved with this, was her statement. And much later, whenever things came to the impeachment hearing, Kenneth Starr actually approached her, gave her immunity against her previous statement. She recanted the whole thing and came forward with the story of rape and everything else. And the FBI had investigated it, and it was pretty valid. The only issue was it had been so long in the past that it was able to be thrown out.
Mm-hmm.
And it was one of those like, wow, wait a minute. Did we actively just find out that our president may have raped somebody at one point? That the FBI is saying this is fairly valid?
Well, that's what's interesting when you look at with Kavanaugh. I mean, a lot of the stuff is when he was real young, right?
Sure.
But think about it with Clinton, and that's when you look at hypocrisy and with my conservative friends, I do totally sympathize, with him. That's why I always love being in the middle. We could totally straddle both sides, and we're not adhering to it. And he was going, listen, the hypocrisy, man, is ridiculous, because he goes, even if Kavanaugh really did these things, right? He was a dumb college kid, probably entitled, but you look at from that moment on forward, it's like the guy has been nothing but an upstanding kind of guy, at least from what we know. But then the interesting with Clinton was that was him as an adult. We're not talking about, he was a drunk college kid. But
he wasn't like a 20-year-old. He wasn't 18, 19 years old, man.
That's the irony of like the hypocrisy of, that was not that big of a deal, or, we're going to sweep it underneath the rug. And then the other side sitting there going, what the heck? Like, that was like a million times worse. That guy did it as an adult, and yet that was okay. And yet, but this guy did it when he was in high school and in college.
Not once, not twice, but thrice.
And that is like, exactly. And that is, it's like, oh my God. But that's where we're at. Let's be honest, man. Morals only matter in politics if it helps you get elected, or if it prevents someone else from getting elected. That's it.
Truth.
I mean, it's
the world of confirmation bias right now is so rife. The fact that people like the cognitive dissonance, the concept of facts presented to me that destroy my paradigm cannot be fact.
That's the scariest thing, where I think it's been this election, and I think with what's happening now is it really does start getting what we call constructivism. It's like how we construct our view of reality. And it used to be, well, like not necessarily alternative facts, but like, all right, this is a different way of looking at it, or this is how we're defining it. Now we're getting into a realm of literally what you see and hear is not true. Don't listen to what this person is saying. Only listen to what this person is saying. And if anyone says anything different of that, they're an enemy. They're doing this because they're evil and they're trying to fill in the blank. Sure. That's what's scary of like, now we're getting into where it's like facts don't really matter. Or it's only my facts. And that's really where we're at once again as a country, where people are just so pit against each other facts. Like, I'm going to give you a great example. So same buddy I was talking to. And so when I asked him, I didn't say, hey, right or wrong, I didn't try to pin him in. I go, listen, what do you really think about all this? And first he was like, I think she's totally full of it. I think the Soros, it's all these people's hands on it. I go, all right, well, I understand where you're coming from. I go, but the thing is, like, what do you take, with the fact that 10 years ago she was telling her therapist about this before any of this was going on. She was kind of quiet for a second. And then so you see that what we call accommodating and assimilation. How do you take in new information that goes against what you're already thinking? He sat there for a second. And that's where he was just like, well, even if she was telling the truth, this is a democratic thing. So all of a sudden you see him taking new information in because he trusted me. Like, okay, I don't think Mike would BS me on this. And then he started then going, well, redefining almost,
as a therapist,
it was 20 years
the one
ago.
thing you would understand is the therapist's point of view and the facts of her seeing a therapist.
Yep, absolutely. And it was just interesting where we're at now. Like, it was funny. Like, I went on Facebook after the testimony, and what was interesting is that, and this is where, once again, politicians, it's like, it's almost sociopathic. That you go on Facebook, and then the vitriol that you saw on, in the hearing, you saw it then in Facebook. People on each side then attacking each other, and it's like, it's like,
and
how
you've noticed, other than bringing up the fact of if we're going to go this far in the background on some stuff, if we're going to go, we need to relook at Juanita Broderick. We need to check that out. That's really the only thing I've said about it. I have pretty much stayed silent on it because, I can't, without all the facts, without, and like you said, it's gotten beyond the point of mudslinging. We've just stepped into the monkey house, folks. There is just feces flying everywhere. That's the way I feel with it. We have full on stepped into the monkey house right now with what's going on in our country. And it's just handfuls of poop being flung all over the place.
And that's where you sit there and go, like, it's funny how everyone always tosses around a deep state this, deep state that, and my dad.
I'm not going to deny that exists.
Yeah, and it's like, I was talking to my dad about it. My dad was a military guy, and I was asking him, like, all right, man, like, what do you really think? I mean, he's been around for a while, and he's just like, listen, let's say there is a deep state. He goes, there probably is something, right?
Sure.
And he's like, the thing is this deep state? Do you see any means to an end with like, okay, I'm going to pick one side or I'm going to pick another side? Or is it more plausible that if there is a deep state, their whole plan is to get the country to hate each other? Because like while we're fighting at the front door, it's almost like they lit a bomb on the front door and then they sneak around the back door and basically do what it is that they want to do while we're fighting up front. Like to me, it's the image I always got in my head of like, remember Elmer Fudd and Bugs Bunny?
Yeah.
Remember they'd get in that little dust devil and then Bugs would just kind of step out of it and Elmer would just be chasing himself. Yes. That's how I almost feel right now watching this. I mean, especially watching it online, it's like, to me, that makes more sense as a hypothesis. There's more evidence to suggest that they're just getting us to be distracted and fighting over BS, while the true agenda, what they're really trying to get done, that's really what the whole plan is, and it's working perfectly. We are so distracted, hating each other, that we're not even paying attention to anything else. And maybe it's one person's opinion, but it's tough to look at it any other way right now.
Yeah. And that's absolute truth. One of the interesting articles that I posted all of a couple weeks ago, before this kerfuffle in Washington started even, was an article talking about how polygraphs don't work, and they've never worked. Like they've been inadmissible in court for years, but yet still they're used all the time. And I find it interesting. Number one, let's get into how we process facts and how it is that two people at the same place can have a different recollection of events. Because it's big. A lot of it can be, yes, very much filters through which we put reality. I myself had a situation a few years ago where I was inviting people to be friends on Facebook, and I ran across somebody that I knew, and I invited them to be a friend on Facebook. And they messaged me privately beforehand with a very long message. And it was like, Chris, I'm really surprised that you would ask me to be your friend. And I'm like, whoa, okay. And it went on to go into the fact that somebody that I knew had apparently molested them.
Oh.
As a young child. When we were in like third grade, something like that. And that I had said something about it in class, like that I was aware of it and had said something about it to everybody in class. And I'm like, whoa, like number one, that just like characteristically does not sound like me. Sounds like another buddy of mine who has red hair, tended to run his mouth a little bit, but I can't think that I would have ever done that. Like it got to the point where I called my mother. Because like that would have been something most definitely that a teacher would have come to from school, that kind of stuff. Had something like that been leaking around a third grade classroom. So I was trying to confirm or deny what my memory of third grade was. Yep. Suddenly like even the way I processed and remembered things, and believe me, folks, like you can absolutely convince yourself that false things are real. You can absolutely, in the same way, the more you tell the lie, the more you believe the lie.
Yep. They actually did this really interesting study on Facebook where I can't remember what the means and methods were, how they figured out what was truth and what was lie, but they did it with kids where they knew for a fact things that they were posting for a lie. And so then when they went back and interviewed them and then one presented them with evidence that it wasn't the truth. Then when they asked them like, okay, well, what actually is the truth and what really did happen? The reality was they had no idea. When they repeated the lie so many times, it just what kind of got set in their brain. They didn't even know what the truth was anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what we have to ask ourselves. And that's what I'm not going to say that she wasn't telling these things to a therapist 10 years ago. But what filter of reality was she seeing things through that she told her therapist?
Well, emotion, your experience of emotion will radically alter and change what you remember and how you remember it. Like, for example, all right, let's say you and I were driving in a car. Okay. Let's say I'm driving. Let's say something happens where it just scares the ever-loving crap out of me. We almost die, right?
Sure.
Let's say you're just kind of like very chill. Very just like, oh, it wasn't that big of a deal. So if we were to go back and talk about this, let's say 20 years from now, the way I remember it, it's going, oh my God, there were flames, there were sparks, a car flipped over us. It was like, I thought we were going to die. And you're going to sit there and go, dude, all right, some car spun out in front of us. It didn't flip or anything. I mean, it was just out of it. There's some smoke. But I mean, really, man, it really wasn't that bad. I don't think that's not what happened. That literally is probably what would happen. And so think about when you have a sexual assault. Let's say one person in their head is going, oh, my God, this is awful. I'm being raped. I don't want this. The other person is either drunk, not remembering it, or let's say they didn't even realize what they were doing was the worst thing ever. One person is going to remember it as the most catastrophic traumatic event in their life. The other person is going to be like, I don't understand what the big deal is. Like, you didn't say anything, or I didn't know that you didn't want to do that. And that's how you get situations where both people can be telling their version or their perception of the truth and then being honest about it. But yet they both could not be telling the truth, or one person could be telling the truth. The other person can't be telling the truth.
Yeah. And that's exactly what we have to get down to. And the only way you can get down to that is a cold calculating fact, actual investigation and looking into things and looking into it properly. Like you said, the filter of emotion. There's something to be said about the classical concept of stoicism, and not necessarily being emotionless, but not letting emotion be what makes your decision. Mm-hmm. Like kind of like there's friendship and there's business, and you have friends in business, but there's business.
Yeah.
Like all around. And it's hard not to filter things through emotion. It's hard not to let our emotion be a raw nerve that is the first thing that everything hits. What are things that people can do to begin to set that literal animal instinct? And don't get me wrong, folks, this is a survival instinct that is like bred into us over millennia. There's a reason why our brains remember more from negative reinforcement than from positive reinforcement. There's a reason why something negative is drilled into your brain 10 times deeper than 10 times that somebody said you did a great job. And it's survival instinct. It's the concept of fire is hot. I just touched fire. I never want to do that again. That's dangerous. And your body learns from that. And that's a lot of what the news cycle feeds off of, people. That is a lot of what political ads feed off of. Is our raw emotion, that instinctual fear that is there to drive us to survival. And that's what scares me, as someone who studied subliminal psychology, things like that, to see the fact that these are literally the tactics that are used, just horrifies me inside.
Well, our chemistry is being used against us for quite nefarious purposes. I mean, literally, you have guys like Sean Parker, Google, Facebook, all these guys coming out basically going, we designed these things to be addictive. I mean, Sean Parker came out and straight up said, we basically hijacked that dopamine reward system where people love just hearing things about themselves. And it's so random schedule of reinforcement that you have to keep checking. You have to keep checking. What's crazy is that you're not allowed using subliminal advertising. Way back when, I think it was in the 70s, wasn't it? Or 70s or 80s, when they basically outlawed using subliminal advertising because they drew a line of that's not right. But the thing is, they drew a line with subliminal advertising, and what social media, politicians, media, everybody, what they're using now is even more dangerous, even more effective than that. But yet that's totally okay. And what's crazy, they've straight up said it. It's not even like a conspiracy.
No.
And so When you're like, it's like, what can people do? Well, what people can do is, number one, realize that we can't necessarily trust these people to do what's right. When you have so much on the line of, I won't get elected, my ratings will go down, my sales will go down, and if I don't do this, they're going to hire somebody else to do it, so I might as well just do it anyway. So we have to take it away from trusting that our officials, the advertisers, the media is going to do this for us. And that's where I think it's about taking it back to conversations among us. I mean, that's the whole point of, my show, Gray Matters, is going to be about, we take away the power of people telling us stuff that we know is not true, or they're telling us in a way that's only for their own gain. And can we more have these conversations with ourselves and then go, well, I know what they're telling me isn't true because you and I have had this really good conversation and we know how this works. It doesn't make any sense what they're telling us. And I think if we can start doing that and taking that power back, then all of a sudden I think we're at a turning point as a country, because then we have the power to insulate ourselves from these tools that they're using.
Yeah. And, it's all over the place. It's interesting, even how far down the rabbit hole you can go with how much this affects society. And the way that people filter information, the way that people view information. A prime example is Connor Daly lost his sponsorship from Lilly Diabetes for a statement that his father made.
Yep.
In 1981, before Connor Daly was born.
Yep.
Connor Daly didn't say it.
Yeah.
He didn't think that.
Yeah, the kid's been nothing, but like an upstanding guy. And I'm a huge IndyCar fan. And I remember when I saw that, I was just like, you've got to be kidding me. It's tough enough to get sponsorship, let alone now you have to put up with that. Come on.
That just blew my mind. But that is how deep we've gotten. That's how far this has gotten. That we've started to make it what are we going to do? I saw a meme probably about 2-3 years ago where it was your grandmother's selfie, and it was a black and white picture from the 50s, and then it was your kid's grandmother's selfie, and it was a girl with her shirt up, and it's that stuff's out there,
Yeah.
There are already people getting fired from their jobs for things that they posted on Facebook in college 5-6 years ago. You were saying just the other day how you authored an entire article for the people that you counsel about how to use social media as a means to vet people for work. Use that as their interview. You'll find out real quick if there's someone that's going to jibe in your company.
Well, it was a futurist. I can't remember his name. He was basically saying that this generation of kids will be the first generation that will never be able to live down a mistake because their mistakes are all out there for public knowledge.
It's never going away.
I think
until their server is wiped, it's never going away.
Oh God! Well, I see the memes that people are posting right now. Once again, it's kind of like a frog in boiling water. I'm sitting there going, if I were an employer and I saw that, what are you thinking? And it's ridiculous, and people, but that's the thing. We get so, going back to the emotion thing, we get blinded by emotion. The behaviors that we choose to exercise serve the purpose of the emotion rather than what we need to do in that situation. But here's the interesting thing. Once again, going back to if we get people to think again, the way our brain works, the prefrontal cortex, the front part of our brain, that's our thinking, rational, reasoning part of our brain. The limbic system is our emotional part. There's actually a direct pathway in between those two, and it's like an arm wrestling contest. You can, if you regulate and use that thinking part of your brain, it will help kind of put at bay the emotional kind of part. And so it's mysterious when we start thinking again, all of a sudden we start putting aside or have the ability to go, even though emotionally this is what I want to do, thinking wise this is what I know what the best thing is to do.
Yes.
And that's where I go back to where this whole stagnation that we have. There's been so many times I've asked people, what's the point of your behavior? when you make that meme, when you say that comment, like, what is your point? I mean, is there some part of you that thinks that they're going to be like, oh, you're right, I am a moron. Oh, you are right, I am a snowflake. Or you are right, I am some Machiavellian guy that only cares about. It's like, what is the point? Is it just about feeling better? Is it just about, you're angry and you feel better when you post that? Because it's not going to bring people together. So what's the point? It's just emotion.
Yeah. And that's just it. You can't let that rule the day. You can't let that keep you from making the proper decision. You can't let that keep you from filtering actual facts, from looking at things in a factual way instead of an emotionally based way. And I am in no way, shape, or form advocating the fact that we think that victims are not victims, or to say that what this woman saw at a party did not happen. I'm not saying that. The question comes to bear, as you were just saying, that the future has said, this is the first generation of people that will never be able to live down a mistake. What happens when the next person, and don't get me wrong, if he was actively raping some people, even 20 years ago, he was actively raping some people. That's not good stuff. But, when we're getting into it, now we need to start calling into question who went girls gone wild at Mardi Gras, and what does that mean? What does that kind of behavior make them prone to when you're talking about bad decision making, that kind of thing. So, I myself have had a string of bad decisions in my life. It led down horrible paths. I'm a better person today. It was mistakes I wish I hadn't made, things I wish I hadn't done. But they were also something formatively that make me who I am. Give me most of my straight up razor-like logic where it's like, look, this is just the way it is how I've had to wire my brain to think so that I don't just think in a circular way and get lost in thought and do nothing else for the rest of the day. Because that's something that my brain used to do. It's a point of depression. It's not that I didn't get a lot of deep thinking done, but I was not a very functional person in life. So I can think about things, but I really need to kind of cut a lot of the thinking to the quick and get down to the nitty-gritty of stuff, because if I start rabbit holing too long on stuff, I will get lost in my brain. And that's just me knowing my behavior. That's me understanding how my brain works and learning to rewire it and function in a different way.
And that's where I always look at, that's the challenge of, think about the positions that we're in, what's our role in getting people to have that balance of thinking, because just like anything, it's yin and yang. We can overthink something, analysis by paralysis, but then we get to a point where we're not thinking at all. I did this with a friend, this was a couple weeks ago, and I think this was actually, it wasn't about this whole Kavanaugh thing. It was about climate change. Okay. Uh-huh. And I asked him, I was just like, he's very strong, like, and I was like, well, what do you actually know about weather? Yeah. Like, literally, like, what do you actually know about the science of like meteorology and everything? Yeah. Well, I don't really know much.
A meteorology class? Like, I haven't. I'm just curious if you have.
Exactly. And, I was a pilot for a long time. So I have you have to understand weather pretty darn well, and I go, all right, well, man, like, well, I have a pretty decent understanding of it, but the thing is, like, you're basically saying these people don't know what it is they're doing. So these people saying this thing that they did for their whole life, you don't believe what it is. And this person is in the, finance industry. And I go, well, what would happen if someone told you don't know what it is that you're talking about with financial advising, that person who's never studied anything, that basically just read a couple of articles, what would you say? He goes, man, they're idiots. I go, so why is it that when somebody who doesn't know anything about your industry tries telling you you're wrong based upon a couple articles they read, why is it on the other end, people that studied everything their whole life, and you're telling them that they're wrong?
Yeah.
And he was dumbfounded. There wasn't a response to it because of, well, that's just what I believe. And it's like, that's the problem with this country, is that
Yeah.
we're not using our brain, or we're selectively using our brain. And it's like, what do you do with that? Yeah.
Yeah. What do you do? What do you do when you are selectively taking in information?
Yep. And you're only going to selectively take it in if it matches what it is that you want to believe, that confirmation bias, that political tribalism that we get. I'm only going to listen to this source of news. I'm only going to listen to this source of news. And they're force feeding me the view of reality that matches with what I believe. But that's not necessarily a good thing. I mean, what did Kennedy even realize when with Camelot with his advisors? And one of the first things he realized after the Bay of Pigs fiasco, he went, I didn't have one person in that room going, baby, that wasn't a good idea. And that's when he realized that you need to have people that think differently than you. Otherwise, you're going to make some really bad decisions.
Exactly. Like, whenever I made those bad decisions in life, it's because I was thinking with total emotion. I was not thinking with logic. I was not thinking about the long play game of life. I was not thinking about a future 5-year plan or anything like that. I was thinking out of total emotion and about the moment right now and nothing more. And now that I look at life a lot more logically, I tend to not make stupid decisions like those anymore. And it's pretty amazing. But even the other night, I had somebody tell me that, and we were just sitting there having a drink in the hotel room up high and watching the volcano show at the Mirage, like from up above. It was pretty cool. And she was like, oh, that's just so awesome looking. You know, like, imagine what it'd be like to design something like that. Like, I wonder how they do that. And I started to explain to her, like, how pyrotechnic blasts like that work, how it's like propane cannons. And she was like, God, you know so much about so many things. And I was like, you know, I remember why. And it's because I was not a very good student in school. And the things that I did want to know about typically weren't taught in school. So I would just go to the library and consume them in mass quantities because I wanted to know something. You know, I wanted to be good at something. So it was my own desire to want to know things and to want to see things from a different view. And I think the one, even being that wanting to know something about everything person, I think probably the one greatest quality I have picked up over the last decade as I've grown older is the point of being okay with being wrong. And even saying, you know, the opinion I have had for the last 5 years is totally now completely reformed because I am wrong. And
that's funny. My golden rule that I tell my clients is to learn how to be okay not being okay.
Yeah.
It's a good rule of life to follow by.
Yeah. And, you know, if you let those moments be the ones where you let that negativity wiring of your brain use that, then you'll be surprised how frequently you'll be ready to be wrong again. You know, how readily your body will accept being wrong. You know, when that's one of the only negative things that you let happen.
Well, even what's even more fascinating with that, like it's the ego strength, as we call it. Ego strength is kind of like emotional stamina. It's your ability to handle intense emotion. And the more experience you get with dealing with that, hey, maybe I was wrong on that, or I'm okay if I'm wrong on this one. Then you're right. The easier it kind of gets. I mean, I'm not saying I'm awesome at it. If you ask my wife, hey, how's Mike with admitting he's wrong? We'll just say it's a work in progress. But you get better at it, especially when – and that's what we say, like marriage is if we're looking for a good model of how a political body needs to be, it's like a marriage. Because if you really think about it, with how many people who are successfully married, are going to raise their hand if you ask them, how many of you don't compromise? You have to compromise. And that's – think about it. That's when you choose – the person who you're married to. Our political body is a forced arranged marriage. And so you're trying to tell me in an environment where it's forced, you don't have to compromise at all. You don't have to admit or having the ability to admit that maybe you are wrong. It's mind numbing, Gosh, and I get fired up about it because as a clinician, I'm in the trenches seeing the downstream results of all this. We're sitting here and wondering why is it we're spending all this money on substance abuse education and the rates keep getting worse. Suicide prevention programs, suicide, depression getting worse.
I can tell you right now, as somebody who did use, it is so you do not feel, man.
Yep.
It is self-anesthetist. It is literally making it to where like you're able to just shut out the outside world and not friggin' feel it.
Yep.
And that is such a horrible, horrible thing to be self-aware enough to say, that is feeling and open to vibration in people that I am, that at one point in my life I wanted to shut everybody out. How selfish of me to not want to be there to help people anymore. Yeah. But that's the point that I got to, and that's why I did that. That's what led to my bad decisions, was me having an emotional breakdown of that, and not being able to cope, not being able to deal with it. So I have a special place in my heart for people to go down that horrible road. And we really need to be ready to reach out to people. We need to be ready to talk to people. And more than anything, folks, if you know somebody going through depression, if you know somebody that needs that kind of help, number one, don't go to them telling them that they need help. All right? Go to them and listen. Don't be ready to talk. Be ready to listen. That's the most important thing. They need somebody to listen. And I think that's what's wrong with our society, is everybody is so ready to talk and nobody's ready to stop and listen.
Yeah, I could have said it better, myself. I think when you look at a lot of these problems that we're having, it's like people really feel like no one is hearing, nobody is listening. It's hopeless. Yeah. It even goes beyond, like, when you look at the failure to launch problem. I tell parents this all the time. And what's kind of gets so fired up about this, and really, this is one of the reasons why I'm doing the radio stuff, is that parents don't realize, well, why is it that they just don't care? Why is it all they want to do is play video games? Why don't they want to go to college? Why is it that the reality is kids have straight up told me, we know all of this is bullshit. So why am I going to go to college, go into debt, do all this stuff right now?
Why are you selling it to me?
You're selling it to me, and I know it's bullshit. I know it does not mean it's going to make you happy. And then where the depression, the addiction comes in, is that they see the way the world is, and they see it a lot sooner than what we did. Yes. They see the world the way that it is. They also then see the daunting nature of how hard it is to change, whether or not anyone's going to listen or hear them. And then it's like, well, what's the point? Imagine being 20 years old and being cynical, seeing the world accurately, but not having any power to change it, and not even wanting to do anything with it, and don't have any ego strength to handle. And it's like, that's where we're at.
I was pretty straight up with the teenagers that I taught for years, about things. I was not too far separated from them. I was in my mid-20s, and I remember a few years ago, when I went through the 4th degree for the Knights of Columbus, sitting on the bus from the ceremony to the reception, a kid got up, and I say a kid, he was like, in his 20s, sat up and was like, "Did you say your name was Chris Jordan from this church?" And I was like, "Yeah." He was like, "You taught me Sunday school, my 7th grade and my 11th grade year. And I'll never forget you and the things that you taught us." He was like, "You were the only adult that did not bullshit me about what college was going to be like, about what would happen between me and my friends, and about the way the world actually worked." He was like, "You were the only one that did not sell me like a false bill of goods about the way that life was supposed to be." He was like, like, "Thank you so much for being straight with me. Thank you so much for making me understand that there will be bad decisions. Bad things will happen. Your friends will do bad things. You may do bad things. That's okay." It's what you do. It's what you grow from it. It's how you learn to use that experience later. And you know, it's just a different way of processing information. As we go out, let everybody know where do you think the first steps are, Michael? What should people be trying to do to begin to make this process of having a more open mind, of starting to break down some of the walls that we actively build with the world around us?
I think number one, and this is what I do with my friends, living in Columbus, it's kind of cool, like growing up in Columbus, being in Dallas and Texas for 14 years, and now recently moving back, having those different experiences. And that's why I love Columbus, is that we're pretty much split down the middle. We have a friend group of 8 of us that grew up with each other, and you have half or one side, half or the other, and there's a couple of us in the middle. And the thing is, how we're able to have conversations with each other is that we listen to each other, even if the other person is saying something that we vehemently disagree. The reality is that we're talking to each other. When I was asking all my friends their viewpoints of the whole Kavanaugh thing, I didn't ask them, why this is right or this is wrong. Hey, what do you believe and why? And I think think about your Facebook, all the listeners out there, think about your Facebook feed. And I don't care if people you hate, people you like, people that were family, start having a conversation. Let's start understanding, why is it you believe what it is that you do?
Yes.
What do you base that on? And just have a conversation. The amazing thing is then all of a sudden it's like a tennis match. Now their volley is going to be different, and then they might ask you, why is it that you believe what it is that you believe? It's what we call dialectics, or dialectical discussion. Sure. You may still walk away diametrically opposed, but if two people are able to listen to each other, hear each other out, understand why they believe, now you're human, and you might hear something and go, oh, wow, I didn't think about that. So I start there. Talk with people, understand these people that believe differently than you, and let's humanize them. They're passionate because they care about their family and their country every bit as much as you. And so let's stop hating each other and thinking we're the enemy, because that's what they want. The only way we lose as a country if we propagate this whole belief that anyone who thinks differently than me is my enemy. No, they just care about everything and have a different viewpoint. So let's start talking. So start there. Talk. Understand. Second thing, start having opinions. One of the things that, and Chris, you sound just like me. I graduated high school with a really bad GPA and messed around even my first year of college. I think I got a 2.1 or something like that. Or
I messed around in college for a long time.
And my friends, I had so many friends called me the dumbest smart kid that they knew, because I'd get like a D on a test or not even show up. Yeah. But then in the same breath, I'd sit there and start talking about, would you see the State of the Union address? And it's like,
yes.
And the thing is, my dad instilled into me, whenever I asked him his opinion of something, like, hey, well, what do you believe about this? The one thing he didn't do was, hey, this is what is right, or this is what the truth is. He go, read this. Because he goes, read this and come back to me of what you think. Because he instilled into me that form your own opinion, and you form your own opinion by knowledge, information, yes. Read different things, and then all of a sudden you start forming an opinion of something.
As somebody with that mentality myself, with a 1-year-old child, I told my wife just the other day, my greatest want and I guess anticipation is that question that's, I don't know, son, let's go find out. Not just here's how it is, here's what I understand, but let's go find out more. Like, let's go explore this together. Let's understand this better together.
Yep.
And I didn't have that a lot with my father. I had it a lot with my grandfather, which is my son has his name. It was one of those that it's very important to instill in a young child the idea of exploration, the idea of imagination time, the idea of them being able to form their own independent thought, of being you're not a kid, you're a little person. You're a little person, And
to me, as a parent, as a father, I have a 4.5-year-old, and to me, as a dad, I look at that's probably one of my greatest, duties as a father is to teach my daughter how to think and navigate the world and think for herself. Because I know if she can do that, she'll, even though emotions are going to get in the way, I mean, it's part of being human, right? We're going to make mistakes, but it's not going to be because she wasn't thinking. It's going to be because I knew better and I just gave into it. I want her to be able to have that, like, that's BS. Think about it. Doesn't matter what people tell us. If we know how to think and hypothesis test for ourselves, that insulates us from the BS, because someone could tell us anything and we're going to know that doesn't make any sense. That makes no sense whatsoever. And man, if we can do that and people can start having that conversation,
one of the, I couldn't agree more. That's just it. We have to have the conversation of how do we bring up the next generation to be able to filter information and think for themselves, not just follow a rote script that's given to them.
Yeah, it's about. I mean, it really is the death of the scientific method is mind numbing to me. I think coming from a research background, our job. This is why I love conspiracy theories, but I'm like the anti-conspiracy theory person in some sense, because my first job is to go, let's see if we can disprove it. That's what you do as a scientist. The very first thing you do is, can I prove my hypothesis? And only if I can't disprove it will I then start trying to prove it. And even then, it's not about one-to-one correlation, 100%. It's based on the evidence, what is the most likely explanation? Tell me, where is that in media conversations with people anymore? Where is that mindset anymore?
No, exactly. And that's what leads to the cognitive dissonance. That's what leads to confirmation bias, even in science. I mean, good God, how I made straight. The only academic award I ever got was astronomy, and I did not study. And it ticked off my whole astronomy class, because they were all like spiral students who were like going off campus for college credit classes. And here's this straight C student like blowing the curve, getting like 110 on every test. And they're like, screw you, dude. What the hell? I made like 108 for the semester or something like that. It was crazy. And I was like, yeah, remember all those books I read in the library that you were making fun of me for in junior high? Yeah, they were astronomy books. And my whole life I've been taught the moon is a barren wasteland. There's no way there could be water. Lo and behold, there's water on the moon.
Yeah.
Forget 60 years of scientific fact. There's water on the moon. So the fact is, number one, you have to be ready for facts to eventually be disproven as we know them. At one point, it was fact that the earth was flat. That was the fact. Because globes didn't exist until we circumnavigated the globe and found out it was a circle.
Well, I don't know. There's a lot of people out there apparently think that, okay, maybe the Earth isn't round and some holographic moon, and I don't know, I'm still trying to figure out the whole disk thingy.
It makes sense if you look at it in terms of time zones and why people are awake at different times across the world and why some people are a whole day ahead. Because if we all fell asleep at the same time, the Earth would stop rotating like a record. Imagine the amount of effort it'd take to get that thing going again.
Well, I always think it's hilarious. Like as a pilot, it's funny. It's like as a pilot, it's like, is the Earth round or flat? I'll take you up to 3,000 feet. You can see the curvature, right? Done, right? But then the thing is, think about like with, I always love Alex Jones, because
sure.
You have to, whenever you have, and I think I wrote an article on this on the Gray Matters website, it's like if you need like 6 or 7 different connections or degrees of separation to prove your theory, you're in trouble, especially when one piece of evidence will explain it. I always love when it goes, well, you have to understand, you have to go back to 1957. Well, you see, there is this little known assistant to a doctor. It's like, all right, already it's BS. You're having to work way too hard.
Yeah, there's way too much information involved in where the trail begins. And for me, it was odd, number one, you're creepy, get out of my head. As soon as we started talking about hypothesis, the first thing I saw, because I've been telling my wife I want to make inspirational posters for my son's room that are different inspirational posters. And as soon as you said hypothesis, the first thing I saw was an inspirational poster of the scientific method. And I'm like, I'm totally making that for his room and putting it up. Like, it will be drilled into his head.
Oh, to me, it's one of the most important fundamental things we need to be teaching people is how to think and be critical and how to just understand the world. Because imagine if, and this is why I can't wait for our show, is when we sit there and have the ability to even start talking with people on differing sides and go, has your view changed? Has your viewpoint changed just based on hearing and understanding of a topic? And if we can do that, man, we are successful in any way we look at it.
Yeah. Even if somebody comes to the point of, I at least now see a different point of view. That's an eye-opening experience.
Absolutely.
And once you take the time to process that, you'd be surprised how many new points of view you come to. Michael, I know you have clients to go see, things like that today. Thank you so much for joining me, for coming in, talking about this hard-pressed issue of the possible election, possible rejection of Supreme Court nominee Kavanaugh. I think it's a very pressing issue in our country. It's something that we have to look at. We have to look once again, like we were just saying, at how we filter information through the scientific method. Like I said earlier, it's a case of cold hard facts here at this point. We need to get emotion out of it. We need to get politics out of it. We need to. I'm sorry, it's whoever the president puts up is who we put through the ringer. So if it's not him, it's going to be another one. We'll see if it's the political stymie of, the typical stagnation of the Washington swamp, where they just sit and do nothing and let it happen.
I'm just happy we can have this Thank you. I mean, I'm just happy we can have this conversation because it's so easy to get caught in a muck of the he said, she said, but it's like, if we really pull the string, this is what this is about. And we need to be having this conversation more. So I guess once again, to everybody that's going to be listening to the show, just, I challenge you. Talk to one person in your friend group. It could be a Facebook, could be whatever, and ask them instead, almost find the person that's the opposite of what you believe and ask them more the question of why is it that they believe what they do. And that's it. Don't challenge it. Don't whatever. And almost write in, call into the show, whatever it is, do whatever. Yeah. And let's talk about what that experience was like. Because I think if we hear other people have that and seeing how different of a conversation will be, now all of a sudden we start getting somewhere, I think.
Yeah. And that's just it. It's trying to teach people to rewire the way they think. And I think that's very important. I think it's extraordinarily important. So before we go, let everybody know, number one, where they can go to check out Gray Matters, because the blog is up. There's some great articles there, things like that. Gray Matters Radio. Tell them where they can go for that. Tell them where they can go also for your help as a counselor, Michael.
Yeah. So graymattersradio.com. You can catch us on Facebook. I think it's Gray Matters Radio, as well, on there. Some good articles and blogs up there. And we'll, here in the next month or so, we're going to start getting our shows and content up. So we're real excited about that. Just go ahead and let's be paying attention to all the Facebook pages for updates when our first shows will be there. And then just because, I know I'm in Ohio, I still have my licenses in a couple states, even if it's one of those things of it's more coaching. You want some professional advice. Hey, I do a lot of tele stuff. So you can get me at michaeldevinecounseling.com, or more on my business consulting side, do a lot of family business advising, organizational work. You can get me at divinetalentconsulting.com.
All right. Well, there you have it, folks. Once again, Michael, thank you so much for joining us here on Dudes and Beer. While you're online, checking out michaeldevinecounseling.com as well as graymattersradio.com. Stop on by and check out the Dudes and Beer podcast, dudesandbeerpodcast.com, as well as our parent network for both of these podcasts, HC Universal Network, where you can get Dudes and Beer, the upcoming Gray Matters Radio podcast, as well as great shows like Scary Dad, Yes But Why podcast, politics, John Bound Politics, Therapy Hour with Rusty Lozano, I know, is getting ready to put some new stuff out, as well as Gentlemen No Class and other great stuff. So thank you so much once again, Michael, for joining us. Until next time, everybody, remember, if you can't be good at it. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Dudes and Beer Podcast. To listen to our audio streams or chat with us live, download the official Dudes and Beer app for Android and iDevices, available on Google Play and iTunes markets. For more episodes, content, and information, visit us online at dudesandbeer.com. You can also find our episodes on Breach.tv, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, SoundCloud, iTunes, YouTube, Stitcher, or your favorite podcast service. Dudes and Beer is a proud member of the HC Universal Network family of podcasts. For more about our sponsors and other podcasts on this network, visit hcuniversalnetwork.com. Thanks for listening, everybody, and until next time, drink responsibly.